I think we just found one deceased person inside a house.
Where Gene Hackman, 95, and his wife Betsy Arakawa, 65, and a dog were found deceased.
He and Betsy were also longtime residents of our community.
These are things that I think are important for the pathologist and OMI to consider to try to make a determination what the cause and manner of death are.
So many questions about the mysterious death of actor Gene Hackman and his wife. Carbon monoxide ruled out, but medication, dementia, and a lack of contact, all very concerning. We have two renowned death investigators joining us on the program this morning to break down all the possibilities. And the mother of 3 missing boys is hoping to get some closure today, trying to get a Michigan court to declare the Skelton brothers dead. What this could mean for their imprisoned father. Also this hour, could autism keep Bryan Kohberger off of death row? The new defense filing for the accused killer. Plus, a Utah wife and mother's phone call to her lover is read in court, speaking about her husband in past tense even before he was missing. We'll talk about the evidence that could be tipping the scales in the case against Jennifer Gledhill. It's all coming up next for you right here on Opening Statements. Good Monday morning to you and welcome to Opening Statements. I'm your host, Julie Grant. Are you ready for some coffee and some court? We got a great show planned for you, so let's get it going. Grab your coffee. It's time for my opening statement. Where are Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner Skelton? Are they alive or are they dead? Those precious, beautiful boys were last seen with their father back on Thanksgiving Day in 2010. And today, their grieving mother is in probate court to have them declared legally dead. 14 years ago, she was supposed to have been able to safely pick them up from her ex-husband's home. But her babies, ages 9, 7, and 5, were nowhere to be found. Their lying sack of garbage father has been serving a prison sentence for unlawfully imprisoning his boys. He told several different stories about how they disappeared. For instance, he said he gave them to an unknown woman. Then he said he gave them to an underground group. That's right, an underground group. Were they sold to be trafficked? Are they even still in this country? What kind of lowlife lets their 3 young boys go off with strangers to God knows where to do God knows what? John Skelton, apparently. What's more, he's set to be released from prison this November. So then what? November comes, he goes free? Without giving any answers up as to where his children are? And whether they're alive or whether they're dead? That stinks. Where is the justice for those Skelton boys? How I wish their father could be legally sent to Guantanamo until he gives up the information that could save his children's lives, or at least give their grieving mother the closure that they're gone. But our laws don't work that way. So we just have to hope and pray that perhaps the proceedings happening today in probate court will lead us to some answers in solving the disappearance of Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner, so that the person or persons responsible will be held legally accountable. That's my opening statement. Let me know if you like it. Right now, it's time for your daily docket.
I went to my mother's bathroom to take mascara or something because I like to do my mascara in her bathroom. And I didn't notice anything, but when I came out, I noticed Rob in her bed.
And what time was that?
It was in the morning, so I don't know, 10, 11 a.m., maybe earlier.
Did you tell the police about 7 a.m.?
Maybe.
That was Fabio Cementilli's daughter, Jessica, describing finding convicted killer Robert Baker in her parents' bed. Her cross-examination is scheduled for today. This is the celebrity hairstylist murder trial. It's going to start back up at noon Eastern time. In Florida, we've got the sentencing and the bedtime murder trial happening about an hour from now. Jermaine Bass found guilty last week of all the charges brought against him in the case where he took the life of his beautiful daughter and wounded his son. Also, in our next hour, we're going to go into a Michigan courtroom where a mother is asking a judge to declare her 3 missing kids legally dead. That's the case I was just telling you about, the death of the Skelton brothers. Have you heard about this story? It's our top story this morning here on Opening Statements. Andrew, Alexander, and Tanner missing for nearly 15 years after their dad didn't return them after the Thanksgiving holiday. The boy's mom, her name is Tanya Zuvers, has been open about her feelings toward her ex, Mr. John Skelton, telling her affiliate WXYZ this was revenge against her.
Do you think this was all about getting back at you?
Oh, yeah.
Every single thing?
Oh, yeah.
Even now?
Mm-hmm. The things that were broken, the things that were destroyed, every single one was aimed at me.
The things that brought you joy were destroyed?
Yes. And the first being my children, my sons. Be a man. Stop being a coward. Stop hiding behind your lies. What did your sons do to deserve this?
Exactly right. Let's talk about this. I want to welcome in our attorney guests, Tommy Pope and Kirk Nurmi. Great to have you both here this morning. I want your thoughts on what can possibly come from this probate hearing. I think the million-dollar question is, could homicide charges potentially come from this? Kirk, I'll start with you, please. Your thoughts.
Well, you know, Julie, unfortunately, I don't see it because provisions like this are statutory. They're not related to evidence. So, you know, what happens after a certain amount of years, each state will have certain qualifications that need to be met for somebody to declare dead for purposes of probate. This is where we're going to probate court as opposed to any other kind of court. And that means, you know, there's not really going to be any new evidence, unfortunately, that I think is going to enable prosecution. It's more a matter of time meeting the statutory requirements instead of any evidentiary issues that could shift the murder case.
Kirk, thank you for that. Tommy, investigators are still working on this case. It's wide open. You've been an investigator. Tell me, what do you think can possibly be done between now and November?
I believe they've turned every stone they could. I agree with Kirk that this type of procedure is really ironically kind of upside down. It's an absence of evidence. In other words, like Kirk said, a certain time period has lapsed. There's no indication of life via, you know, sightings or you know, involvement or checking accounts or anything like that. So this is the opposite end of the burden of proof that you have in the courtroom. And so I hate to say it, but short of this father, you know, coming clean, I think he broke his ankle and said he was trying to commit suicide. I see so many ironies in how many trials we cover with kids' lives, and it's always the parent was going to commit suicide. They have no problem killing the kids, but they don't seem to be able to finish themselves. Not being disrespectful to people that are dealing with suicide, but I think it's a cheap excuse that they're using. And he knows, and I guess it's like the wife said, his final satisfaction is just sitting on what he knows.
Yes, thank you for saying that, Tommy. I think a lot of people are thinking that, and you said that well. No disrespect to anyone who's dealt with suicide, but it makes you wonder, what was this about? Was it about revenge, like the wife thinks it was about? You know, why do your boys harm, right? I have a clip for you both. The detective on the case says this guy, I mean, he is just full of lies, lie after lie, lies so much, you know, the lies have lies. Let's take a look.
I do communicate with him through a lot of different avenues and get information from him and about him. He's still giving us nothing but lies. Every time he seems to share information with us, it's either misdirection or it's just a bold-faced lie. His world is closing in on him. All the family and the distant friends and people that he has been in communication with, that's all fallen off. Our goal is to get him to where he doesn't believe that anyone believes his lies. And I think he's getting to that point. If the boys are out there, I hope they know that people are fighting for them every day.
So November will be the time when his sentence is up. He's been denied parole multiple times. Kirk, I'm curious, if you were representing John Skelton, what, if anything, would you be watching out for in terms of any legal maneuvers coming from the state to try to prevent him from getting out at the expiration of his sentence?
Well, you know, absent any new evidence, absent any shifts in the evidence, as I said earlier, I don't think that there's that concern, right? I mean, if I was looking at it from the other standpoint, you know, when he comes out, you know, as ironic as it might be, this might be the chance, because he's had a chance to get paranoid about this. There's no statute of limitations. If he was involved in their death, is he going to get concerned? Is he going to go back, cover his tracks, et cetera, right? So that's really where the case could break, if he gets paranoid that he might be caught at some point in time. But absent any changes to the evidence between now and November, I don't see that there's, unfortunately, any real jeopardy coming his way.
I appreciate that, Kirk. You know, looking at that legally, this is important to know, right? So he has rights. To be clear, he's never been accused of killing his kids. People just know he was the last one with them, and he's given multiple stories about where they went. Tommy Pope, I'm curious, and maybe I've watched too many movies. Is there any last-ditch effort that investigators could potentially do in the prison? Is it possible to work with an informant, somebody, to try to get this guy to talk?
Well, if you read between the lines, when the officer was talking a minute ago, he was talking about, I've communicated with him through numerous different ways. So it wouldn't surprise me, you know, obviously the recorded jail calls, if he has those, you know, a cellmate. I think I agree with Kurt that the evidence at this point was going to show up. It would have. And what we call these are max out dates. You know, some cases have them, some cases don't. But, you know, if he's truly maxing out, there's not much that that can be done, and he's actually incentivized to not talk about it now because he's that close to getting out. So, you know, like Kirk said, once he gets out, maybe it shakes the Etch-a-Sketch, and he's still isolated, and you got kind of a starting over position. But, you know, I was thinking that you were talking about the death and getting back at the mother. There's twofold. Why would you ever kill your kids? You know, but twofold. Those kids are going to be his connection to her for weddings and graduations and all that stuff. So selfishly, he does it for that reason too. Not only to get back, but not to have to deal with her, to give her as much pain, kind of a parting shot to give her as much pain as possible. So short of, as Kurt said, kind of returning to the scene of the crime or doing some things when he's out, if he keeps his mouth shut, I think he's probably gotten away with it.
Such great analysis from you both. Oh, this guy, he boils my blood. And we're going to watch that hearing together in our next hour. As soon as the judge is on the bench, we're going to go there together live. Tommy and Kirk, I'm so glad we have you both here today. Stand by, kindly, please. Coming up next here on Opening Statements, here's what we've got for you.
She tells him to not think of her as a monster and to remember her who she was before she opened her mouth. And the informant tells the defendant that he was frightened by what she had told him.
So a Utah woman asks her lover not to think of her as a monster because of what happened to her husband. And guess what? That lover turned informant. We'll talk about it. But first, we're breaking down the possible theories surrounding the death of beloved actor Gene Hackman and his wife and their dog.
Grieving widow or mastermind behind a murder.
Monica Cementelli is accused of plotting to kill her husband.
Famed celebrity hairstylist Fabio Cementelli.
Prosecutors say she and her lover killed Fabio to collect a big life insurance policy.
The defense may say she's a bad woman, but she wouldn't be involved in a murder.
It's a whodunit Hollywood story, but will there be a twist that no one sees?
The celebrity stylist murder trial, today, only on Court TV.
Gene always said, I don't think about legacy. I just hope people remember me as someone who tried to do good work. So I think I speak for us all when I say, Gene, you'll be remembered for that and for so much more.
Oscar-winning actor Morgan Freeman paying his respects to his dear friend Gene Hackman. This was during last night's Academy Awards ceremony. Questions behind the deaths of the famous actor and his wife and their dog are what's trending in true crime this morning. As Hackman and his wife Betsy Arakawa were found dead in their New Mexico home last week, although their deaths remain under investigation. Speculation may have led to the couple's passing. Speculation's been nonstop. Let's talk about this. Renowned forensic pathologist Dr. Michael Baden presented this theory on Hackman in a recent television appearance, saying, quote, there was no carbon monoxide, and he had the most common cause of death in this country, severe heart disease. So that would cause him, having cardiac arrest in the mudroom, to collapse right there. Interesting theory from Dr. Baden, being able to trace back the date on the pacemaker as well. Gene Hackman might have been dead for 9 days, according to what his pacemaker showed. So what else are investigators going to dig into? Maybe the cell phones, perhaps? What can be gleaned from the scene? What about at autopsy? And did you hear portions of their bodies had become mummified? We have two tremendous guests here on the program this morning. I want to bring them in now. Board-certified forensic pathologist Dr. Priya Banerjee and crime scene reconstruction expert Dr. Kenny Kinsey. Good morning to you both. So let's start, if we can, with the things that can give us clues as to how Gene Hackman, his wife, and their dog died. Ladies first, please. Dr. Banerjee.
Good morning. I think, anytime we have two people dead, that's the unusual aspect of it. But I've seen it in the past, and it doesn't always mean it's nefarious. Anything happened. It could just be really terrible circumstances, if you will, terrible turn of events. There's pictures of beautiful home that you're seeing. In any case, I think, he's quite elderly, probably had a cardiac event like Dr. Baden was saying. And I think she probably had something catastrophic. And I wonder if the stress of that then triggered him. Unfortunately, the dog, in my understanding, was in a crate or isolated. If they don't have someone to care for the dog, then the dog will also perish.
Right, so sad, because we know two other dogs were alive and well on the property, but the one that was in the kennels, we understand it would stand to reason wouldn't have access to food and water. Dr. Kenny Kinsey, to you next, please. What are the things that you would think would give us the biggest clues about what happened?
Thank you, Ms. Julie. Some of the things that have been mentioned so far and have been released, lack of blunt force injuries, lack of those things that we look for as crime scene investigators, be it blood spatter, be it footwear, anything that would lead them to believe this could have been foul play. And from everything I've seen released so far, we don't have any of that in this case. And the best evidence, of course, is going to be a timeline. And with the information that was gathered from the pacemaker, I believe they're well on their way. And I have to agree with the good doctor. It could just be a chain of unfortunate medical events. And then with the canine, we're probably looking at malnourishment, unless they're going a different angle. Once you rule out the carbon monoxide, unless it's a poison, whether it be induced or a natural occurring poison, and that's not going to come out to the toxicology. I think we have a chain of unfortunate events by everything that's on the table thus far.
Thank you for that, Dr. Kinsey. I want to show you and Dr. Banerjee some of the facts that we know this morning. I know there are a lot of unanswered questions, more unanswered than there are answered at this point, but here's what we know. Their bodies were found after a welfare check. Apparently, it was maintenance workers on the property who discovered them. They've both tested negative for carbon monoxide poisoning, which was something that was speculated. One of Gene Hackman's children thought initially that could be a cause of death. According to the affidavit, Gene Hackman's wife, Betsy, had mummification in both her hands and her feet. One of the deputies on the scene said it looked like Gene Hackman had a sudden fall in the mudroom, just based on what he saw. His cane was there, his sunglasses were there, and we know where Betsy's body was. There was an open prescription bottle, scattered pills on a counter in the bathroom, and what Dr. Kenny Kinsey just noted for us, no signs of that external trauma. Which brings me to a question for you, please, Dr. Banerjee. I want to share with you another part of Dr. Michael Baden's theory here, that perhaps Gene Hackman had fallen first, and then perhaps his wife goes to help him in the bathroom, maybe goes to get pills. Let's say it was a cardiac event. He's theorizing that maybe she struck her head on the way down, had some kind of internal injury to the brain that isn't going to show up on the outside, maybe some bleeding on the inside of the brain, and saying that perhaps that could have been what occurred here. What are your thoughts on that?
Sure, and just to backtrack, sort of tying everything together, when we approach, like my colleagues and I and the investigators approach a case like this, anybody's death, you have to look and rule out the bad things first. And slowly we're gleaning facts that less and less, there's no evidence of trauma. All the bad things are slowly being ruled out, both by autopsy and investigation. Once the toxicology comes back, that's the money. I think once, we can speculate who passed first and of what. I don't know of what her internal findings were. If there was head trauma, quite a possibility. It's also, did he react to her passing? I don't know if it's a chicken or the egg type thing. I just don't know, because we have so many unknowns. The autopsy is still the gold standard, and unfortunately, that's not a 1, 2, 3, like a quick exam. And remember, toxicology takes time. And I hope that my colleagues will, be able to expedite things, and slowly the most important and probably the most reassuring facts will be released, like no trauma, no evidence of robbery, no, nothing bad like that, but slowly it'll unfold. Again, this is a team effort. It's not just autopsy, it's investigation, it's police. So it's a team effort working to solve this and give us all the answers.
Well said, Dr. Priya. Thank you for that. We know that a press conference was held the other day by the Santa Fe County Sheriff's Office to update everyone on what's been gleaned so far, including the last reading from Gene Hackman's pacemaker. Let's take a look.
An initial interrogation was conducted of Mr. Hackman's pacemaker. This revealed that his last event was recorded on February 17th, 2025. I was advised that a more thorough investigation will be completed.
Based on what you know about the conditions of both the bodies, who do you believe died first?
That's a very hard thing to determine. Even with the assistance of OMI, we asked that question because that's a question that we want answered. That's a very hard determination to make, and I don't think even OMI could make that determination based on the initial autopsy.
Okay, so let's talk about the autopsy and the cell phones. I'm wondering what can be gleaned from the cell phones. Dr. Kenny Kinsey, would you speak to us about that as it relates to what you said, the importance of establishing that timeline?
Yeah, Ms. Julie. Court, depending on the carrier and the type of service, it can give so much valuable information. Sometimes movement, any activity, whether it, be text, emails, phone calls, that kind of thing, and it'll reinforce, it can support the information that they've gathered from the pacemaker at this point. And like the doctor and the law enforcement administrator said, it's a very hard thing to determine which one came first. Maybe cell phone activity could help provide an answer to that. Maybe it won't. But it's one of those things that you have to dig into it. And just like with the toxicology and the teamwork between investigations and pathology, it takes time to get that information.
Sure. Thank you for that, Dr. Kinsey. Dr. Priya Banerjee, let me go to you about the autopsy, something that I think can be stunning to hear for many of us who aren't used to doing autopsies like you are. You hear that there's been parts of Gene Hackman's wife's body that have mummified her extremities, as we understand it. Would you explain and describe for us, if you would, what exactly that means and how it might affect what you would do at autopsy?
Sure. So I think, that's the mummification, which is the appropriate term, is a part of decomposition. So that happens after death. And in a inside level, we start decomposing as soon as we die, but to be recognizable, it has to be days, multiple days. I can't say exactly. But interestingly, there could even be like microclimates in such a big house. So you can't always just it's not a predictable number of days that someone would mummify. Mummification, just to clarify, is drying of the hands, like the skin or the feet of the hands and feet, and it becomes leathery. So it can be, sort of that softness and the warmth of the hands and feet go away. It can be sort of leathery to really, really hard. Again, just being a drying effect, which is consistent in a desert environment. More than that, it's hard to say. It's not a trauma finding.
Understood. Just something kind of fascinating, I think, with this case, which just all around is fascinating. Just so sad, the way in which Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy and their dog all found dead. And we thank him for his service. We've learned he was a Marine, and that is something wonderful to remember about him, in addition to all the great acting. We'll leave the conversation there for now, but big thanks to you both for your time and your expertise. Dr. Priya Banerjee, Dr. Kenny Kinsey, thank you both so very much. Coming up after the break, we're talking about defendant Bryan Kohberger.
You're coming from Washington State University, and you're going where? Oh, okay.
His defense could be using autism to try to get the death penalty off the table. And in our next hour, we've got convicted killer Jermaine Bass set to be sentenced for his crimes that involve the killing of his 5-year-old daughter and the wounding of his 8-year-old son.
Detectives arrested 28-year-old Bryan Christopher Kohberger.
You never know. Like that, our neighbor was, a possible quadruple murderer.
This morning, we're spotlighting the Idaho student murders case against defendant Bryan Kohberger. And did you get a load of this new development? There's motion from the defense team to strike the death penalty. And in a brief description, it reads, regarding autism spectrum disorder. The motion itself is under seal, though, which is so frustrating for us because we can't read the motion and know exactly what's being argued, but we can make some inferences. We know that one CDC study estimates about 5.5 million Americans are living with autism spectrum disorder right now. So what might Kohberger's defense team be trying to do here? So many questions on this one. Let's bring in our guest. So pleased to have here criminology expert, author, and professor at St. Thomas University, Dr. Debbie Goodman. And with us, retired criminal defense attorney, someone who did death penalty work for many, many years in Arizona. You may recognize the name of one of the people whose life he saved, Jodi Arias, attorney Kirk Nurmi on the program too. All right, so let's start a little bit with this legal filing, because Kirk, I think a lot of people are going, huh? What? Could this be a valid legal reason to get this off the table? What do you think, please?
Well, not in a judicial sense, but at least not right now, Julie. It's really a complicated answer. But one of the things the Supreme Court has said, from a legal basis, a legal standpoint, is that someone cannot be executed if they don't have a rational understanding of why they were executed. Now, execution, if this sentence were imposed on Mr. Kohberger, would be 15 years down the road statistically. So the judge is going to, the defense team is going to want to put this in front of the judge, probably going to be rejected as a exclusionary factor right now, but it is going to maybe play down the road 15 years when the habeas attorneys are taking a look at this. The other thing this does when they raise the specter of it is, remember, mitigation in a death penalty case doesn't have to be correlated to the crime. It's not an excuse for the crime, but it could be a reason for the jurors to give mercy. And you put that out there and you bring that forward during a sentencing phase of a trial, and one juror, and all it takes is one, is to say his connection to autism might be enough for a reason for me to give him mercy and not sentence him to death to begin with. So there's multiple layers to a filing of this nature, and then we can expect to see expert testimony at the sentencing phase. It really exclusively is going to deal with that sentencing phase and ultimate prospect of execution.
I really appreciate that, Kirk. Okay, so it's almost like we have to think about this trial in two parts and think about, okay, this isn't something that would come into the guilt-innocence phase where the jury's on that fact-finding mission of what occurred here. This would only come into play if he's convicted, and then, as you said, mercy could be, one of the reasons that this may be cited. Dr. Debbie Goodman, I want to start by playing a clip for you. We haven't heard Bryan Kohberger talk a whole heck of a lot, but let's go back to that day in that traffic stop with his dad before he was arrested.
He was right up on the back end of that van, pulled you over for tailgating. Is this your car? Okay, cool. Where are you headed?
Well, we coming from WSU, and we're scanning.
What's WSU?
I go to the university, basically. That is SWAT team area.
I'm surprised there wasn't more about this. He's saying he witnessed this police incident. Dr. Debbie, let's dig in a little bit on this. What do you think of his reaction there, the interaction with the police officer? Your thoughts, love to hear them.
Sure. I think, Julie, that this individual is completely aware of, attuned to exactly what I believe his role was here in this case, and the level of planning and premeditation and preparation that had to have gone into this. But that clip would also suggest to me certainly somebody lucid, fairly relaxed. A lot of people aren't that calm, let's say, when pulled over by law enforcement. Also, he was using good eye contact. So I know the focus of the conversation is about autism and how that may play into a potential mercy issue or status regarding the death penalty. But I really feel that we're looking at and listening to a hedonistic killer and there is such a classification, Julie. Some of these mass murderers, serial killers that we discuss on your program certainly derive pleasure from beginning, middle to the end. And I almost feel in that clip, he had a little sense of pride and pleasure knowing that he would be able to drive away and wouldn't be handcuffed that day.
Ooh, that's interesting, Dr. Debbie. Yeah, let's talk some more, getting into his mind. I think that's what everybody wants to do. And when at first I heard this, I think we were all disappointed we can't read the motion, but at least we can make the inference that perhaps he is living with autism. He's also highly intelligent, as many people living with autism are. I'm thinking to even get into the PhD program to study criminology, you have to be very smart. To be a teaching assistant, as he was, very smart. I don't know who's going to have mercy for this guy. Dr. Debbie, could you speak to that, please? The kind of analysis that you do in your field, I would imagine not easy, is it?
100%, Julie. Very involved, very analytical. Again, as you know, my background, I've been a professor for 30 years and have had just the great pleasure and honor of working with thousands of men and women who are today's FBI, DEA, Secret Service, Homeland Security. And yes, he is an accomplished individual academically, which would also speak to one's level of devotion, dedication, and determination, quite frankly, to obtain a bachelor's degree, a master's degree. And yes, at the PhD level, we look at that process really as the pinnacle of academia. And although he was just in the early onsets of the study, I can assure you at those levels, it really is a deep dive into the forensic psychology, the psyche of mass and serial murderers. And as you've heard me say before, I truly think he was participating in his own social experiment. He was well read about Ted Bundy and Dennis Rader, and he wanted to see if he could get away with it. And I think if he did, Julie, he would have become a serial killer.
And Dr. Debbie, before we have to let you go, I know you've got a theory you've developed on this case. It's so brilliant, and you have an acronym to remember it easily. Would you kind of walk us through your theory, the acronym, and how it fits on the facts, please?
Yes, thank you, Julie. So for the case, I created the JAR theory, J-A-R, jealousy, anger, revenge. I truly believe that this suspect was jealous of our victims, Maddie, Kaylee, Zaina, Ethan, both individually and collectively. I think he was angry that he did not have a social network at the time, 28 years old, really apart from rather than a part of any type of social dynamic, and ultimately took the revenge by taking their lives. And just how sad, brutal, and tragic all of this is. But I believe he knew exactly what he was doing. He knew what he was doing was wrong. He wanted to see if he could get away with it. And thankfully, he did not.
Looking at those beautiful victims, it's chilling hearing you speak. Again, a brilliant theory you have, Dr. Debbie. I hope you write a book on this. I've said it before. I'll say it again. I'll write the foreword for you. Please publish that. I know we have to let you go and get off to class. Thank you kindly, Dr. Debbie Goodman. And Kirk's coming with us after the break. Here's what we're talking about.
She tells, and I quote the informant, "I think that the fact that you got scared of me, that part, it broke my heart, because I was like, wow, if you think I could even hurt a fly, like he's not a person. He wasn't a person anymore."
Oh, this case is something. Look at this lady, Utah mom Jennifer Gledhill, that's her right there, sat quietly as the prosecutor read the transcript of one of her phone calls to her lover, urging her lover not to be afraid of her. This is the evidence that's tipping the scales. We'll talk about it next.
An Iowa man is found unconscious after crashing his car. He asked police to check on his girlfriend, recalling flashes of violence. Now he's on trial for her brutal murder.
The Visions of Violence murder trial. Live coverage today on Court TV.
This stuff about playing a race card is preposterous. The racial division was so great that people saw the facts differently.
Trial and Error. Why did O.J. win? New episode Sunday night, 8 Eastern and Pacific. Only on Court TV.
Welcome back. Will a shocking phone call to a secret lover tip the scales in the case of a Utah murder suspect named Jennifer Gledhill? She's a mother of 3 as well, and she was in court on Friday for her bail hearing. She's accused of killing her husband, Matthew Johnson. He was found dead last year as he was sleeping in their $1 million home near Salt Lake City, Utah. In court, the prosecutor noted a phone call between Gledhill and her lover. Listen to this.
Right before the defendant reported Matthew missing, the informant recorded a phone call with the defendant. And rather than playing it here, I just want to summarize some points and what is recorded on that recording. In the phone call, the defendant apologizes for telling the informant about what happened. She tells him to not think of her as a monster and to remember her who she was before she opened her mouth. And the informant tells the defendant that he was frightened by what she had told him. And then the informant, and I quote, says to her, hypothetically, if the roles were reversed and I did something to someone and I told you that I carried it out, Like, you would be shocked and scared, wouldn't you? And the defendant responds, quoting, well, not if I deserved it. I always preach that I was like the Queen of Hearts in my past lives because I'm like off with their heads. I'm like, if we could just round up the scum of this earth and put them on an island or just kill them all, I could ship-shape this country back into a good place. Now then, even in that phone call, she starts claiming that this is just a hypothetical situation. However, she tells, and I quote the informant, I think that the fact that you got scared of me, that part, it broke my heart, because I was like, wow, if you think I could even hurt a fly, like he's not a person. He wasn't a person anymore. He wasn't Matt anymore. And what's key from that recording is at this point, Matt hadn't been reported missing, yet the defendant was referring to him in the past tense.
Now, Johnson's body has never been found. The judge denied bail for her. What about that phone call, though? Let's talk about the phone call. Is that going to tip the scales of justice? I think so. Let's bring back in our legal eagles, Kirk Nurmi and Tommy Pope. Let's get your thoughts on this. Tommy, you first, please. What do you think?
Well, you know, in a bail situation, it's risk of flight and danger to the community. And clearly, if whatever it is she's told this informant who she had a relationship with, it clearly enhanced the potential danger. Now, I've got to believe the defense knew about this before today, and so I'm sure they're planning, you know, whether suppression motions or cross-examination of the supposed informant. I'm sure they're not caught flat-footed on that.
Right, Tommy. Kirk, to you next, please. How do you think this phone call is going to play as the case progresses?
Well, you know, female killers are an interesting breed, Julie. Someday we have to talk about it more extensively. But, you know, this phone call leads me to believe rather than worried about bail, she better get comfortable spending the rest of her life in prison. She better start adjusting. Because the justifications and things like that, this is probably the tip of the iceberg here. It seems like this is going to be a real solid case against her. So I think if I'm right that this is a tip of the iceberg, this is going to be a pretty cut and dry case for the prosecution.
Right, Kirk. Yeah, she sits there just looking like she's unbothered. I mean, what an arrogant attitude. You know, her poor husband, there's poor kids now. I mean, this is just awful. I have a clip from her defense attorney. This is her counsel responding to the allegations at this juncture here at the bail hearing. Let's take a look.
The two biggest factors that cut against the state's requirement of substantial evidence are the lack of a body and lack of a murder weapon. Mr. Johnson is a highly trained Special Forces officer with several tours of combat under his belt and is equipped with abilities your standard citizen simply does not have. These abilities and experiences give multiple explanations and possibilities that have nothing to do with Miss Gledhill as it relates to his disappearance. Further, Your Honor, the lack of confirming evidence, I would argue the lack of confirming evidence on items allegedly disposed of by Ms. Gledhill is another cut against the state's requirement of substantial evidence.
All right, so we're going to see more from this hearing. You're going to get to watch all of it on Court TV Live today. 6 p.m. is the time we're going to start playing it back, so get ready. It's going to be quite an interesting hearing to watch. And as we get ready for Court TV Live to begin at 9 a.m., we're going to say goodbye, but not goodbye forever, just goodbye for now to our wonderful friend and regular legal analyst on opening statements, Kirk Nurmi. So as many of you know, we're headquartered in the East here at Court TV, and Kirk lives in Arizona out west, and with daylight saving time, the switcheroo is going to happen on Sunday, and so it's going to be a little too early to wake up the next couple months. But Kirk, you'll be back in the fall, right? We can count on that, and maybe some Court TV Live appearances.
You bet, Julie. It's been a blast, and I look forward to seeing you and Tommy, your smiling faces, back in the fall.
Oh, we love you, Kirk. We'll give our love to your beautiful family and Ron the dog, of course. And thank you for everything. We'll be seeing you soon. And Tommy, we're going to see Tommy after the break as Court TV Live kicks off. That's all for this episode of Opening Statements. You could watch it again if you like. We put all the episodes up for you on our website, courttv.com.